Welcome to another episode of Eva desperately trying to find a halfway decent novel to read in 2021. Because Vicious certainly did not do the trick. I read this until maybe page 150, which is about halfway through, and then I just skim read the rest until the end, and it still felt like a waste of time. I can't believe how underdeveloped this was in every aspect. Characterizations, relationships between the characters, the psychological motivations for their actions. None of what they did seemed plausible because there was no preparation, no lead up to it. They just seemed to do what they did because it was in the author's outline. And as a result, the characters didn't seem real to me, the story didn't seem plausible, and it was all just completely uninteresting. And the whole thing just gave off an impression of having been just quickly thrown onto the page, onto the keyboard on a rainy weekend. And it seemed like no love and no care whatsoever went into the writing of this story. I really don't get why so many people love it to pieces. To me, it was just completely lifeless and empty. So this didn't work out. I am still reading The Shining. However, I've put it on the back burner because it's just a little bit too slow for me at the moment. I picked it up, I think, 4 or 5 times since I last talked to you, and I just can't get past the 17% mark because I fall asleep each time after 2 pages at the most. And it's not because it's boring, it's just because it's too slow for my level of tiredness at the moment. So I've put it on the back burner and will pick it up again when I feel a little more energetic. In the meantime, I am putting all my hopes onto this gorgeous little darling, The Bedlam Stacks by Natasha Pulley. This is a historical novel with, I think, some paranormal, supernatural elements. The story begins in 1859, and I think it will span a few years. And the protagonist and first-person narrator is Merrick Tremaine. I'm not sure how old he is yet. I have read a few pages, like 12 pages. Let's say he's in his late 20s or early 30s, and he used to work for the East India Company, but he was shot and is now recovering at home. I'm not sure how he came to be shot yet. There's been mention of China, so I assume it was something to do with the Opium Wars. In any case, he's at home now recovering, but he can barely walk anymore because his leg was so badly injured. He still gets a letter from the East India Company telling him to go ahead with an expedition that he had been planning to Peru, where his grandfather had gone before him and I think had plans of establishing a plantation or something. In any case, Merrick is supposed to bring back quinine or seedlings of quinine. Quinine is a plant that was used to treat malaria, which was apparently affecting India quite badly at the time. And that's as far as I've gotten. I've gotten to the point where Merrick gets the letter that tells him to go ahead with the expedition. And the summary on Goodreads tells me that when Merrick gets to the settlement where he is supposed to harvest the quinine, he finds out that there is some evil lurking in the woods that surround the settlement, and apparently it snatches away everybody who comes too close to the border of the forest. And apparently there is also going to be a gay love story with I think it's a Spanish priest in the settlement. That sounds altogether quite interesting, I think. And I've gotten 12 pages into it, and it's the complete opposite of vicious. It takes so much care to introduce characters and to give you glimpses of their inner life and their thoughts and emotions without actually just telling you. I think it's quite gorgeously written, and it's quite gorgeous. The cover art is quite gorgeous as well, isn't it? And speaking of gorgeous, and I promise I didn't plan this beforehand, it just came out this way, but I've also finally bought myself a copy of On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Wong. This is a very autobiographical, not quite epistolary novel, because it's one big letter. The whole text is styled as one big letter of the narrator to his mother. And like I said, I think this is very autobiographical, and Ocean Wong put a lot of his own experiences into this. And one thing that's at the heart of all of his works is this situation that he is in as somebody who speaks English as a second language, and one that he or his family never necessarily meant to adopt as their second language and their everyday language. And many of his family, or what relatives he still has in America after they've immigrated or after they fled from Vietnam, not all of them have necessarily adopted English readily or skillfully. This is, of course, a very confusing situation, but also one that holds a lot of potential for interesting new thought processes. Because as a bilingual person who speaks two languages that are very different from each other, not only can he always choose between two very different paths that his thoughts might go down with these two languages, but he is also from the beginning aware that there is no natural law that says that you must even stay on the path. And I love listening to Ocean Wong in interviews and podcasts because he has such an idiosyncratic and original way of speaking and therefore of thinking. I still wasn't sure if I should buy this book because these are all topics that I usually prefer to read about in nonfiction, but in the end my curiosity won. And what tipped me over was actually Lucy from the channel Crescent Pages talking about this book recently and loving it. And she has such a thoughtful way of talking about her reading. And although our reading tastes aren't necessarily always aligned, I think that we have a very similar approach to our reading. And so I thought, okay, I'll take the plunge and get this book. And this now comes in a very inexpensive paperback edition, but I think that this cover is just spectacular and so much better than the original cover. I'm going to insert a clip that I will film in daylight so that you can see it better and it focuses better. So these gorgeous orange leaves are displayed in front of a night sky with stars, and there's also a shooting star in the upper right corner. And so it's just an absolutely fantastic representation of the title. Shooting stars falling down to earth, where they are briefly gorgeous before they wither and turn orange like leaves in autumn. And I've also started to read a third book on the side, which is one that I found on a giveaway shelf, and I started reading it right away. It is this volume of poetry by Federico Garcia Lorca. It's called Romancero Gitano. So this is an original collection of poems. They were written between introduction between 1924 and 1927, and they are basically exactly like the title suggests. This is all extremely folkloric and extremely romantic in the original sense. And I just love Garcia Lorca's poetry because it is so intense. The imagery and symbolism are extremely rich, and reading these poems almost feels like you're being drowned by all this incredibly potent symbolism. And on top of that, there is always a very strong musicality to his verses. You may be familiar with at least one of his poems, Pequeño Vals Vienes, which was adapted by Leonard Cohen into his song, I think it's called Take This Waltz. To be honest, I don't think it is a very good adaptation of that poem, because it is extremely different in tone, I think, than the original text. If you are interested, I'll link you down below to a video of a different adaptation of this song, which I think fits the tone of the poem much better. So yeah, these are the 3 books that I am putting all my hopes in at the moment. I think gorgeous is a definite theme for this collection, and I just realized that it's also a very, very gay collection. That's never a bad thing, is it? Anyhow, I'll be reading a bit further in all of these, or at least 2 of these, I promise, and then I'll get back to you. I think I have my Sunday sentence for this week. This is when the narrator talks about his head gardener. The family is quite rich. Sisyphus was still embarrassed, and when he spoke, the gorse and the ferns in his voice withered until there was almost no cornwall left in it at all. And he goes on, he's such a sweetheart. He goes on, it didn't matter that I wasn't well spoken. Charles, his brother, was, and as far as the gardeners were concerned, I was only a taller, blonder extension of him. I'd never had the energy to sit them all down and explain. I didn't go through their faults with him nightly over dinner. He is so sweet, but he takes de-escalation to an extreme, and even when his brother is maltreating him quite badly. For instance, when he makes him live in a room on the 3rd floor, even though he has this bad leg. And he says, Charles was only asserting his ownership of the house, reminding me that living there didn't make anything mine. But it was so stupid that it didn't deserve any more oxygen. I think that's kind of admirable, but on the other hand, I also want him to fight back. And I hope he finds some determination to fight back in the course of the novel against whatever. But right now I'm loving this. I think that so much attention to detail went into this when it comes to characterization and to the painting of the scenery, which of course are connected especially because this is a first-person narrator. And he is such an endearing one. I already love him, and I just hope that nothing too bad happens to him before this is over. But I know it probably will, and that will be okay too, because I love having my heart broken by a novel, let's be honest. Hi guys, I'm in the park again in my sunny spot, and sitting here somewhat pretentiously reading poetry, because you see, I'm worried that wearing my Shakespeare bag won't already make me seem pretentious enough, you know. But in fact, I don't even know if a lot of people recognize the quote in these latitudes. Anyhow, I've been reading a bit more in Federico Garcia Lorca's poetry collection Romancero Gitano, and it's slow going. I can only read about a poem a day, maybe two on a good day, because it is quite hard for me. It's quite hard to read these Spanish poems, and I have to put a lot of thought and concentration into it. I'm loving them, however. I've read 6 or 7 so far, and my favorite one is, I think, the fourth poem. It's called Romance. No, it's not. Several poems are called Romance, and I had the wrong one at first. My favorite one is called Romance Sonambulo, and after I had read it and thought a bit about it, I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it's got its own Wikipedia entry even in English. I think it was the English one. And turns out that it is the most famous poem from this collection, and a lot of interpretations have been offered for it, and some were reproduced in the Wikipedia article, and none of them was the interpretation that came to my mind when I read it. The title translates as Sleepwalker's Ballad, and that's exactly what it feels like. It has an extremely dreamy feel to it, and it has a chorus line that gets repeated throughout the poem. The line is Verde que te quiero verde, and this very musical line, I think, adds to the hypnotic feel of the poem. So if you are not already familiar with Garcia Lorca's poetry, I can only urge you to pick him up and try it out sometime. It is Sunday evening, and I have now read a token 1.5 pages from On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, just to get a feel for it. And if those 1.5 pages are any indication, then I'm sure I'm going to end up loving it. I especially love the first 2 sentences on the second page, which read, "I am writing because they told me never to start a sentence with because. But I wasn't trying to make a sentence. I was trying to break free." Meaning he's trying to break free from convention and from conventional ways of saying things. Because only if and when you are to a high degree free of convention, only then can you ever hope to convey any personal truth, which by nature can't be expressed in conventional ways. And language is always conventional. Therefore, there is always a gap between what an individual feels and what it can express with language, which is by definition the opposite of individual. I'm just loving this topic, as you can see, and I can't wait to read more, but it isn't going to happen tonight because I'm not awake enough for this at the moment. I'm also absolutely loving the Bedlam Stacks. I'm only on page 36 and it has already made me cry. Absolutely lovely. These two books are, however, a source of stress for me as well at the moment. You see, I'm an awful worrier, and I ordered these two books off of Amazon and had them delivered to a collecting station that's operated by a third party, so not Amazon delivery. And something went wrong when the parcel was deposited in the collecting station, and the tracking number wasn't scanned. So now it is still in the tracking. It is still listed under not delivered. I've called customer services, but for me at least, nothing visible has changed. So now I worry that at some point Amazon will automatically refund me, and I don't know what I will have to do then. And yeah, it might not even happen, but like I said, I'm such a worrier, and not knowing what will happen is enough to stress me out. Anyhow, this has been a very successful reading weekend, I would say, especially if we compare it to the rest of the year so far. I'll talk to you again once I've read a little bit more in these books, especially in the Bedlam Stacks. Bye for now. So I'm wrapping up this vlog, and with it this little vlog series today, because I think by now I can confidently say that my luck has changed and I've finally found some good books. I just hope that it's not a fluke and that my reading continues in this fashion for at least a little while. I've finished reading my poetry collection, and on the whole, I really enjoyed this so much. Sometimes, though, Lorca's mysticism and all his celebrations of folkloric traditions got a little bit much for me, especially because I think they are largely performative. They are affectations, I guess. But Lorca's imagery, like I already mentioned back in the park, his imagery is so original, and the images that he conjures are so vibrant, and that made up for it. And also his musicality, which I've also already mentioned. music doesn't feature very much on the whole as a theme or a motif in the poems in this collection, though. And as soon as I can, I'm going to try and get my hands on a copy, an inexpensive copy, hopefully, of one of his later collections. I guess I'm going to have to look up and see which one it is that contains my favorite poem, which is still Pequeño Vals Vienes. And I'm going to try and get a cheap copy of that one. And for this next section, I have invited the llama over. Hello. Because, to recap, The Bedlam Stacks is the story of a British man, who works for the East India Company, or as it is then called, the India Office, in 1859, which is when the story starts. He is sent by the India Office to Peru, even though he is recuperating from a leg wound. But he is a horticulturist, and the India Office are in dire need of cuttings from the cinchona tree, which is the tree from which you get quinine, which is used in the treatment of malaria. And malaria is apparently plaguing the opium plantations in India. Problem is that Peru has made the cinchona tree a state monopoly and has forbidden foreigners from taking out any parts of the trees. So our protagonist is sent in together with a friend of his who is a cartographer, but who also used to be his colleague. They used to be smugglers, opium smugglers for the East India Company together. Now they are sent into Peru to illegally take cuttings and smuggle them out of the country for the East India Company. Sorry, the India Office. I love how this book is written with so much attention to detail. And as you know, it's first person narration, and I think that the narrator is incredibly sweet, and he has such a lovable voice. But I think the highlight of the book will be to see all the colonial attitudes challenged. Our narrator has already shown some discomfort at the attitudes of one of his contacts, who is a Peruvian of Spanish descent, and he has made some very condescending remarks about Peruvians from different ethnic groups. But the protagonist has so far failed to recognize his own governments and his own countrymen's and his own problematic behavior and practices. I mean, he used to work for the East India Company in the opium smuggle, and he was shot, and all this happened somehow. This backstory, it's never expressly explained, but it happened somehow in the context of the opium wars. And the existence of those and the fact that they are a historical fact is something that I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around, to be honest. And now our protagonist is about to rob a country that was colonized as well by Europeans and has only recently formed a state and gained its independence. And he is going to rob it as a European himself, if I may call a Brit a European. And he is going to rob it for his own government, or the India Office, same difference, because they need it, because their opium production in India has been affected negatively. That same opium production that ruined India's agricultural landscape and affected millions of people negatively, and for which they then fought wars against China. I guess this is something that I can expect to be addressed at some point by our protagonist, right? So, yeah, the future is looking a little bit brighter today, at least where reading is concerned. Even more so since this whole issue with the shipping and the delivery seems to have sorted itself out. So, I'm looking forward to a very good reading weekend. I don't know when I will film my next vlog because I don't think that my life will be much to look at during the next few weeks. But we'll see, maybe on a special day or when I go hiking again. Until then, normal service will resume. I'll see you again very soon, guys. Bye.